When digital restoration specialist Dr. Sarah Chin zoomed in 4,000% on this 1899 photograph in 2019, she stopped breathing. For 120 years, everyone who viewed this picture saw a woman and a young girl holding hands in a garden, a mother and daughter, in a sweet Victorian portrait. But the high-resolution scan showed something that made Sarah immediately call the police archives. The woman in the photo had been dead for 3 weeks when the picture was taken. This was not a normal family portrait. It was evidence of one of the most disturbing crimes in Victorian England. And the girl holding that hand had no idea. Before explaining what the restoration found, it is important to understand the situation. On August 15, 1899, neighbors in the Whitechapel district of London noticed a strange smell. This neighborhood was already famous for the Jack the Ripper murders from 11 years before. The summer heat had turned the crowded buildings into hot boxes of brick and misery. But the smell coming from the ground floor flat at 47 Theodore Street was different. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit left in the sun, with the unmistakable scent of a decaying body. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, who lived upstairs, finally reported it to the police. She told Constable William Morris that the smell had been there for 3 weeks. She hadn't seen Miss Hartley or the little girl Emma come out once. Constable Morris and Sergeant James Peyton arrived at 10 a.m. They knocked on the door, but there was no answer. They heard small footsteps, and then a child's voice saying, "Mama says we can't open the door." When asked where her mother was, Emma said, "She's right here. We're holding hands." The officers pushed the door open. Inside the dark, dirty room stood 7-year-old Emma Hartley. Her dress was filthy, her hair was tangled, and her eyes looked far too large for her small face. She was holding the hand of a woman sitting in a wooden chair. The woman wore a dark Victorian dress. Her eyes were open but cloudy, staring at nothing. Her skin was grayish-green and peeling. Flies crawled across her face. Emma calmly told the officers that her mother was tired and needed to rest. Constable Morris got sick in the hallway, while Sergeant Peyton knelt in front of Emma. She told him her mother had been sleeping since her birthday on July 25th. She said her mother told her never to let go of her hand, so she stayed there for 3 weeks, waiting for her to wake up. 2 days before the police found them, a man named Thomas Whitmore had visited the house. He was a photographer who specialized in post-mortem photography, the Victorian habit of taking photos of the dead as a memorial. He had received a letter from Miss Hartley days earlier, asking for a final photo with her daughter. The letter included £2 for payment and instructions to meet in the garden. When Thomas arrived on August 13th, he found the money and went to the garden. He saw the girl and the woman in the chair. He didn't realize the woman was dead. He assumed she was just very ill or already prepared for the photo. He took the picture and left. When the police finally arrived on the 15th and pulled Emma away, she screamed in pain, not fear. She felt she had betrayed her mother by letting go. Upstairs, Mrs. Blackwood tried to comfort her, but Emma would not eat. She just whispered that she wasn't supposed to let go. The police surgeon, Dr. Harold Greaves, determined that Adelaide Hartley had been dead for about 3 weeks. She died from morphine poisoning. They found a bottle of laudanum and a suicide note in her lap. The note explained that she was dying of a painful disease and chose to end her life. She arranged the photograph so Emma would have a memory and told the girl to hold her hand so someone would eventually find them. The case became a massive scandal in London. People debated whether Adelaide was a monster or a desperate mother. Detective Inspector Arthur Wickham was left with many questions about how she planned everything so perfectly, including how she timed a photographer to arrive weeks after her own death. Please let me know if you would like me to continue the story or focus on a specific part of the investigation. The deeper he looked into Adelaide's final days, the more chilling the case became. Adelaide Hartley was a seamstress, working from her small flat and barely earning enough to feed herself and Emma. In early 1899, she had been diagnosed with advanced tuberculosis. By July, she was coughing up blood and could hardly work. She had no family, no savings, and no way to provide for Emma. After her death, Inspector Wickham discovered that Adelaide had spent her final weeks planning with incredible detail. On July 10th, she visited 3 different chemists to buy laudanum, purchasing small amounts from each to avoid suspicion. She had gathered enough for a deadly dose. On July 15th, she wrote to Thomas Whitmore to arrange the photograph, paying in advance with borrowed money she knew she would never repay. On July 20th, she told Emma that she was going to take a long sleep soon, but that Emma must hold her hand the entire time until help arrived. She framed it as a game, a test of loyalty and love. She asked her daughter if she could be a good girl and hold Mama's hand no matter what, no matter how long it took. On July 25th, Emma's 7th birthday, Adelaide gave her a small cake she had saved for. They celebrated briefly. Then Adelaide took the laudanum, sat in the garden chair exactly as she wanted for the photograph, and died while holding Emma's hand. What haunted Detective Wickham most was the precision of her timing. She understood that the summer heat would cause a body to rot quickly. She knew neighbors would eventually notice the smell. She knew that if Emma were found too soon, she would be standing next to a fresh body, and the experience might traumatize her even more. But if Emma were found after the photograph had been taken, the final memorial image of mother and daughter could perhaps offer some comfort. It might give her something to remember her mother by, even if the situation was horrific, and she had been right. Thomas Whitmore had taken the photograph on August 13th, and the police arrived on August 15th. Adelaide's timing had been a perfectly terrifying combination of motherly love and careful planning. Wickham wrote in his case notes that the subject showed extraordinary planning in arranging her own death and discovery. He noted that the psychological impact on the child would likely be permanent. He questioned if this was the most loving or the most monstrous act a mother could commit, concluding it might be both. Thomas Whitmore went to the police on August 17th, 2 days after the discovery. Having read about the case in the newspapers, he was horrified and upset. He told investigators that he had photographed a dead body without knowing it. His voice shook as he realized he had photographed a child with her mother's corpse. He thought it was just another memorial photograph and believed the mother had just died, not that she had been dead for weeks. Wickham asked to see the photograph. Whitmore had already developed it the day he took it, intending to send it to the house. He handed it to Wickham with trembling hands. The image showed exactly what Witten's described, a young girl in a white dress standing in a garden, holding the hand of a seated woman. The woman's face was turned away, shaded by a wide hat. Roses climbed the brick wall behind them, and afternoon sunlight moved through the leaves. At first glance, it looked like a perfectly normal Victorian portrait, but under close examination, it became terrifying. Magnified with a glass, Wickham noticed details that made the photograph one of the most disturbing items in the police archives. The woman's hand held by Emma showed dark patches in the sepia tones, suggesting decay. Her dress had strange bulges where her flesh had bloated from gases. Tiny dark spots revealed flies feeding on the body. Emma's face, in contrast, showed no fear. She smiled slightly, looking at the camera with the serious expression children often had in portraits back then. Her small hand held her mother's tightly, fingers locked together. Wickham ordered the photograph sealed in the case file. It was too upsetting for the public to see, yet historically important. This might be the only known photograph showing a living person posing with a corpse while completely unaware that the person was dead. Post-mortem photography was common, but in those cases, everyone knew the person was deceased. Here, a child believed her mother was sleeping, holding hands with a body that had been rotting for 19 days. Later, another detail made the image even more unsettling. When Adelaide's body was removed the chair, investigators found marks on her wrist. She had tied her own hand to the armrest to make sure it stayed in position for Emma to hold as her body changed. Every part of the plan had been executed. The photograph was exactly as she imagined, one final portrait of mother and daughter in the golden afternoon light. To anyone viewing it, it appeared ordinary. No one would guess one had been dead for weeks. The photograph remained hidden for 120 years. Experts occasionally talked about it as an extreme case of suicide and trauma, but the actual image was rarely seen. In 2019, Dr. Sarah Chin, a digital restoration specialist, gained access to the archives. She scanned the photograph at ultra-high resolution. Digital enhancement revealed what people in the past could not see. Beneath Adelaide's hat, her face was partially visible. Her eyes had collapsed inward, leaving dark holes. Her mouth had fallen open slightly, and the skin on her face had slipped, giving her a skeletal look. But there was more. In Adelaide's lap, partially hidden by her hands and the shadows of her dress, was another piece of paper, a second letter that had never been found by the original police. Specialists using the scans could read the text. It was dated August 12, 1899. It said, "Emma, if you are reading this, it means you survived. You held on. I am so sorry, my darling girl. You think I'm sleeping. You think if you hold my hand tightly enough, I'll wake up. But I won't. What I've done to you is unforgivable, but I had no choice. I could not bear the thought of you starving alone. This way, you'll be found quickly. There will be a photograph of us together for you to remember me by. Hold my hand, Emma. Never let go. I love you. Forgive me if you can, Mama." The date was impossible. Adelaide had died on July 25th, yet this letter was dated August 12th, 18 days later. Either she had somehow written it after death, or someone else had placed it in her lap before the photographer arrived. But who? Emma couldn't write. The flat had been locked from the inside. No one entered until the photographer arrived. Modern analysis confirmed the letter was in the August 13th photograph and not added later. Either Adelaide Hartley had somehow written it while dead, or something unknown had been in that locked flat with Emma during the 3 weeks she held her mother's hand. The case remains a mystery. Emma Hartley was taken in by a cousin in Manchester. She married in 1912, had 3 children, and died in 1960 at age 72. She never spoke publicly about what happened. However, her daughter later said that even as an old woman, Emma would sometimes reach out in her sleep, her fingers closing around something invisible, holding a hand that was no longer there. In 2023, a paranormal team asked to see the photograph, claiming they found strange energy in the image. The police denied the request. The photograph remains sealed. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some hands, once let go, should never be held again. And some photographs capture more than just light. They capture the terrible lengths love will go to, even beyond death, to protect what it cares for. Would you like me to look into more historical mysteries from the Victorian era, or explore more about the history of post-mortem photography?